Hello, book nerds. Welcome to the Booknerds Podcast. We are back after a slight bit, I should say, but I'm so excited to tell you that the book at hand is amazing, and we are going to have fun with it, of course. And it's quite a different one, to be honest. One I have never seen, an author take such a risk when, so early on in his career. And I would like to congratulate Manu, who is with here to discuss the book. And of course, he's the author of of Janya Bharat, and it's right here. And of course, you can see it on Manu's screen as well. It's an interesting take on the Mahabharata. Of course, there are many books that have been written about this, but it's not about the main protagonist of the Mahabharata. That's when I was really intrigued about the book, and I was like, okay, a commoner's perspective from the Mahabharata. How is Manu going to pull this off? Congratulations, you have done it really well. And thank you so much for writing this book, Manu.
Hey, thanks, Rohan. Amazing. It's an interesting and amazing feeling that it's out
Yes,
there.
we would love
And
to see actually, we would love to see the hard cover because in India, we have got a paperback. Can you show us like
oh,
closer to the camera?
yeah,
It
sure,
would
yeah.
be
This
great.
is the hardback, hardcover or hard.
Yeah,
It's
yes. So
it's
this
much
is
more.
the paperback version. Yeah.
It's much more sturdier, and of course, it looks like the 270 pager that is
Oh
actually.
yes, 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 totally.
So
Totally. No, I really long for this one actually. But let's get over our obsession with hardcovers and move on because we are here to discuss this book, which is quite interesting. But before that, let me tell everyone who is not aware about who you are. Where have you jumped in? Into this author world. Why did you jump in? But of course, Manu is an Indo-Canadian author, and I suppose you are in Canada right now,
yeah, in Vancouver, yes.
in Vancouver. And of course, he has, jumped into the author world with the Janya Bharat series. And so you get it, like it's not going to be a one off. And we are going to see much more of this. And I was like astounded when I was reading your bio. I was like, am I going to read this during the podcast? Because of course you are an academician and you have got like you are a complete scholar, like a physiotherapist. So much is going on, an executive leader. You are a researcher. Of course, you moved to Canada from Rwanda, which is very interesting because I thought, okay, this will be a very kind of what do you call, a cliched story, because loads of people move to Canada directly from India. And I was like surprised, like and the best thing was that you have mentioned that you are a lifelong learner, which is really refreshing. Of course, Manu is a multi-linguist. He can speak, read, and write fluently in Telugu, Hindi, English, and Gujarati. So we'll be talking about translations as well, then, because we have to talk about that. Um, uh, so he has also given a TEDx talk and multiple TEDx talks now. In fact, I was watching your TEDx talk. Just amazing. And the most important thing which I noticed on your bio is that you were included in the list of British Columbia Book World's Who's Who list for 2022. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
It's super interesting whatever you have been doing, and I thought you were just like 30 odd. So you have been achieving a lot. Anyways, I'm not going to ask you your age. Don't worry about it. So let's get into the book. This book, Janya Bharat, which of course I was like, how is he going to pull it off? Because everybody knows the story, like especially the millennials. We have grown up on this. We know most aspects of it, but it was quite refreshing the way you have kind of set up the narration. So I wanted to talk about that because a commoner's perspective, how does one do the research? Because it's quite complicated. Where does kind of fiction end and non-fiction starts? I want to just know at the start of this session, and of course, why Mahabharata?
Yeah, I mean, one thing they always say, right? You always long for your home once you're out of it. So once I was away from India in 2007 was when I left India to Rwanda, and of course in 2013 I came to Canada. So since
Yeah,
I left India, I started reading more about India now that I'm
right.
away of the home, and I came across a lot of research and notes, information about Mahabharata, Ramayana, the Maha scriptures or the epics, you
Yeah,
can say, right? And culturally, again, you go back to your roots. So I started reading more about them, and over time in the past 10 years, let's say 10, 15 years, I have done so much reading on Mahabharata and Ramayana. uh, and then if a thought came up, right, once I was thinking about like my own family, my own ancestors. I come from central India,
yeah,
close to Hyderabad and Warangal, those
yeah,
kind of areas. I was
yeah,
like, okay, what were we doing, like my ancestor would be doing at the time when this epic war was happening, which everybody believes that I call it historical fiction for that
yeah,
reason, because we feel that we believe that it happened. So I was
yeah,
like, what were they doing at the time? So with that thought,
yeah,
I researched more, like if I
yeah,
can get more information on the common people who were there at the time.
yeah,
Then I also came across videos by Nilesh Ji,
yeah,
etc., who write about Indian historical fiction,
right.
history, and
Yeah,
Amish Tripaঠি's fictional side of the things.
yeah,
I got inspired with all these things, and I was like, you know what? There isn't much information, so let me dig
right.
further, and that continued to inspire me to write this book too.
Yeah,
And I wanted to make this much more about the commoners. That's why it's
yeah,
called Janya. Janya means common, whereas
right.
Mahabharata is Maha, epic.
Yeah, yeah,
So so that's kind of the journey of my research and trying to understand, trying to learn more about
yeah,
Mahabharata and our culture. What were they
yeah,
eating? What were they doing? Like, what were others doing at the time? So
yeah.
that's how it evolved over time.
Right. It's so interesting. You mentioned a thing that when you went out of India, you started kind of, being more curious about it, curious about these stories. Sometimes it's better to kind of, get away from it to really value it, right? I mean, you don't really I mean, especially we know, I mean, that, these things happen. We have faith. We know that these stories have kind of made us what we are. But still, we kind of doubt them, and kind of we are always skeptical. We don't really want to read more deeply about them, and that's something, I mean, that has happened over the years. I mean, not many people get into it. Like, we can learn so much, but we just think, okay, let's look towards the West and learn from there. It's simple. It's that tendency. I don't know why is that, but it's just a colonial thing, maybe. So, anyways, so that
It's an
that
interesting
is there.
point you made. One point you made is that we feel that though we grew up with these epics and
Yeah.
these cultural things, we feel that these are all just fiction or something, because
Ah,
the way it's written sometimes, or the way we read it. Like in my book, Janya Bharata, it's all about the war. This is the
yeah,
first part, and it's called the
yeah,
war. So it's concentrated on the Kurukshetra war.
yeah.
And when we read about Kurukshetra war, we talk about these celestial weapons that were used, fires and snakes,
Oh,
and
yes,
all these, and all these weapons being used. And we saw in our TV serials when we were young,
yes,
they would show all with these animations, etc. So we feel
yes.
that this is all magic or something. But
Right.
that's why I wrote the book in such a way that we actually understand the war as the war has to be.
Hmm. Hmm.
So without going into the celestial weapons side of the thing, it's more about
Yeah,
what was the formation, how was the
yeah,
attack, so that
yeah.
maybe that's the reason why sometimes we feel it's something different, but no, the war
Hmm.
happened.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think you're so right that, it was so, I mean, perhaps glorified. And, things we watch in our childhood, they are just so, kind of elevated. The experience is so elevated that we feel that, okay, this was something out of the ordinary. This was totally fiction, magic, and, that in the realms of fantasy,
yeah.
actually. So, especially our generation, we kind of, look at it like total, like it's Harry Potter for us, like,
Yeah.
like that. So you're so right to humanize it. You have done a commendable job. Let's know two ways about it. I loved your take on whatever you have done. You have just, you've talked about strategy as well. in war. Of course, you have talked about the apathy of war. I mean, there's a part in the book, and that this was really, it struck me. And I suppose the author, like you, why am I saying the author? So you also, it happens to me. I don't know. So you have also kind of driven a point there, and this was interesting. You have written, why do common people like us have to be brought into this dispute between families? Do the Pandavas and Kauravas understand the consequences of entering this war? What are all the wise men around them doing? Can't they help in negotiations? And this is a theme even now. So would you like to talk more about this? Because most of our generation would be like, what the heck, they were bad people, Kauravas, we have to kill them, Pandavas have to do this. It's all simplistic, right?
Oh, of course. I mean, like it's black and white side of the things, right? If you see it, who is bad and who is who is right and who is bad, wrong, of course. But from a cultural point of view or from a faith-based perspective, we say it's dharma. So that's what it happened.
Right.
But what happened during that time is that also they were warriors. They knew how difficult it was going to be. So they did try to negotiate. That's what they say. Right? Krishna went to, I think, to to the Kauravas, and they spoke to them. He was insulted too, and he was
Mm,
sent back. So all those things. So negotiations were done, but when those fail, there is war. It
mm,
ends up in being a war. But who is most affected is, apart from the royals or the main people, the leaders of that nations, or the clans. It's the soldiers.
right.
And like even now, like when India Pakistan, or in that way, any war, or Russia Ukraine, or
Yeah.
even the world wars that we came across,
Mm,
when those nations, they fight against each other, it's troublesome, not just for the leaders, but
yeah.
the common population, and the soldiers. We lose so many soldiers. How
Yeah.
is that affecting their family? And that's
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to write it as, because the this particular series, this particular book was
Mm,
concentrating on the Kurukshetra war.
right.
How the common people, they were just dragged into this war. They were told, "Hey, here is a war. Kauravas are fighting with Pandavas. Let's
Yeah.
let's fight."
Yeah.
So they were just pulled in, all the soldiers, right? So what
I
was
know. And that was super interesting for me because all this was happening, of course. I mean, if I call it, I mean, the map would have been very different back then.
yeah, yeah.
And I would love to know more about that as well, because that was something I was kind of, struggling with a little bit. What were the distances like? I think so, it would be very different. Let's talk about the village first of all. This village and is getting affected by this huge war that is coming up. Everybody's worried about the Kauravas and Pandavas not sorting their stuff out, and this village is just trying to survive. I mean, it's nothing more, nothing less. They have given their support to the Kalingas, and because of a certain reason, they want to be protected from this tribe which keeps on attacking them. They just wanted to get into an alliance and not worry about anything, just live a chill life. Just these people are actually multitasking. During the day they are plowing the fields, they are just having a good time, but they get into this war for no rhyme or reason, and this happens even now. I mean, people who are just ordinary people who just want to grow some rice perhaps in a small village in India will be affected by a war. They are part of the supply chain. So talk us through this part. And that this was like super interesting, non-glamorous, but I'm glad that you have written the book to bring out the story.
Absolutely. Again, we don't want to add the hype and the fantasy side of the things, right? My intention was to bring the book in as genuine way as possible, and that's why I even wrote about what were the day, what was the puja place could be like. How
Yeah.
would they meet? They had friends.
Yeah.
They were a common a tribe, right? Ustra Karnikas is what they're
Yeah.
called, and actually speaking, in Mahabharata, it's written that they actually fought, yeah, in the side of Kauravas. So I took that
Wonderful.
name and
Yeah.
researched where they would have been, and they were told they were southern of Godavari River. That's where I actually
Wow.
placed them. Of course,
Wow.
the village Devasthana, which is the capital of that kind of
Yeah.
tribe, was a
Yeah.
fictional name, of course, but the
Right.
rest of the things were, I try to weave between the fictional part and
Yes.
the historical or the epic part from the
Yes.
Mahabharata, actually. And yeah, I mean, like, these were just a tribe who were sustaining themselves, like their sustainable farming and etc. But and
Yeah.
also they were able to defend themselves. But because of this other tribe, again, I wanted to show how normal geopolitical stuff would be, right?
Yeah.
Like, there is another tribe who wants to take over because of some past revenge stuff. That, of course, when I say Janya Bharata series, there is so much scope to write other sequels or prequels,
I
right?
know.
So we're going to look into those kind of things. So the idea over here was, again, moving when these so they go in with Kalinga
Yeah.
kingdom, and Kalinga was invited into the war because of Anga kingdom was another alliance with Kalinga,
Yeah.
and Anga's king is Karna.
Yeah.
So when Karna was pulled into that, all these alliances were pulled in, and everybody was pulled into that. So
Right.
I was like, let's say I took example of like this World War as an example,
Right.
right? UK was being bombarded by Germany, and what
Yeah.
happened to US? Hey, they asked
Yeah.
for help, and US came into into the action.
Yeah.
So similarly,
Yeah.
I was thinking in that way to say, and Canada was also supporting UK.
Yeah.
So I was thinking in that way, or even Indian soldiers at the time, British India, we were pulled into that. So I was like, okay, if
Right.
war was being fought between two different clans or
Yeah.
nations,
Yeah.
how intricate the connections and the alliances are, the
Mhm.
geopoliticalness, that
Yeah.
even a common tribe, a small tribe like these Ustrakarnikas, had to be pulled in because of their alliances. So that's
Yeah.
how I try to put. I try to make it relatable even to the current political
Right.
situation, if somebody has to connect it with this right now.
It is totally, and the way you have written it, I think so. This will resonate with many because, of course, there have been so many wars, but even now, as we speak, there is tension, across the globe in some form or the other, and everybody gets affected, and it's so relevant. I'm glad that you have written it, this book, in this way. There was something else which really, which was very kind of disturbing also at the same time, when a villager talks about whether Abhimanyu would be sent into the war, and this part is really interesting for me. uh, you have written that she didn't want to leave her son's hand even for a second. I don't know how other mothers are accepting to send their young sons to this war. So there were people who didn't really want to. I mean, we don't care, I just want to be safe and be happy. Will Prince Arjuna's wife Subhadra be willing to send their son Abhimanyu into the war? She asked during the dinner the other night when Arochan and Purna were not in the room. Uh, Chitrangad, right?
Yeah,
Chitrangad,
Chitrangad, yes.
yeah, replied boisterously, "Of course she would. With a son as brave as Abhimanyu, who won't?" So there is such a boisterous, a soldier who wants to wield his sword like all the time. He's so, into it, and he wants to just, apply whatever he has learned growing up. The vidya that he has kind of, and the tactics and whatever he wants to just apply it to the war. But then there is the wife who is thinking like, will the royals be so gracious to send their sons and daughters into the war? So this parallel was like very it was very interesting and disturbing for me, because this happens all the time.
Mhm.
The commoners pay a price for a decision made at the high table. So talk about this and kind of, how did you kind of tackle this theme?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point there that you went so deep in the story and found out that particular lines there, because again, this is all about the commoner story, right? And I was like, what would be happening to the these soldiers were called upon. Yes, very good. Hey, we are fighting, so you need to come. But they
Yeah.
were such a normal family. Just imagine, like my kids are teenagers right now,
Yeah.
like 17. So it's like
Okay.
that's the age Abhimanyu was, right? 16, 17.
Right.
I think that's what,
Right.
and that's what the age we were showing Arochan's age around that
Arochan is also the same age,
same
17,
age,
right?
around that
Yeah.
same age, right? So I was like, what was going on in their in the minds of their parents. Well, here is his father Chitrangad. His portrayal of his character is that he's very boisterous. He would like to showcase his skills. So he's like, oh
Yeah.
no, no, it doesn't don't matter. It doesn't matter. We will go and fight, and my son will also fight along with me. We'll win and come, because he
Yeah.
was so confident about his skill set, right? And whereas mothers, again, that's where the softness comes, right, from a
Yeah.
mother's side of the things, to say that,
Yeah.
okay, I may be sending this because I'm compelled now to send my son, but
Yeah.
will the royals also do the same thing? Is Abhimanyu being sent, or is it only my sons? Like, is it
Yeah.
only the commoners kids who are participating, or actually the
Mm.
leaders are also participating
Yes.
directly or not? So I wanted to give
Truly.
that context, that the thought process in my readers, and say, aha.
It's such a political move that you made there, but it is so valid, because I mean, commoners do pay the price. I mean, look at any war. I mean, you have talked about the World War and of course recent wars as well. Look at the plight, and even the Middle East, look at the plight of the citizens there. They have been struggling for like 20, 25 years,
Yeah.
maybe more than that. Look at Afghanistan. Anywhere there's war, commoners suffer, and everything else at the top kind of, mostly, it's all hunky dory. Like,
And
let's
then
not.
and the character is also very different, right? Some people really want to participate because they know
Mm,
how to fight. Like Chitrangad, for example,
mm,
though the protagonist Mitrajit can also fight, but he is
yeah.
more cautious because he was like, hey, oh, I have my daughter, I have to protect you. Why are we
Yes.
like? He still had that conflicting thoughts. Where
Yes.
Chitrangad, his character is like, oh, you know what? Let's go and fight. So there could be possibilities that there are people who are ready to fight. There
True.
is a saying in English, "Desh ke liye jaan de denge."
Ah,
So there are people who are still eager for that, right?
yeah.
But at the same time, there are people who are like, oh, why my son?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally, it is so true. There are so many aspects of war, and if one reads about different wars, these aspects are very common. It's a common theme, and I was like uh, surprised pleasantly that even then, there could have been perhaps, a theme like that. And if we look at the Mahabharata in detail as well, there will be such themes, even from the royal side, I suppose. So
Absolutely.
I think so. Before we move on, let's take a question. We have a question for you. Okay. It's Shresht Mrinal. I think she's a she. Oh, yes. How to stay true to the Mahabharata while at the same time building fiction around it? That's a question that had to come up, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the historical fiction around Mahabharata. So yes. So
Yes.
again, we know so much about Mahabharata. At least most of us, we have read or seen the serials, and that's how we got into
Yeah.
Mahabharata side of the things. So how to stay true is to do proper research. I went through a lot of research. Like I didn't again, as I said, like even the tribe Ustra Karnika is actually
Yeah.
a tribe who
Yeah.
fought with them. Ekapadas were also a tribe, and
Yeah.
Kalinga was in alliance with Anga. So
Yeah.
I try to go as deep as possible,
Yeah.
and try to be true to some of the characters. You talked about distances, right? How long uh,
Yes.
the kingdoms were from each other. I actually did
Yeah.
some research, and I came across like how many yojanas, or that's what they were
Right.
called at the time.
Yeah.
So I calculated with Google Maps to see how much time does it take to actually
Wow.
walk through so many kilometers.
Yes.
You calculate yojanas into kilometers and how many
Yeah.
days does it walk, and it showed me like 3 days. Okay, but these were soldiers.
Yeah.
These were like good built men who can walk
Like,
faster, and there was a need for that. So, okay,
yes.
maybe 2.5 days. So that's how I actually try to calculate the distances and
Yeah.
how and where they were camping. Because if they walk for a day, they should camp in the night. So which
Yeah.
places were they camping on the way to Kurukshetra? So again, I try
That's
to
a
be.
lot of detail. That's a lot of detail. It's not easy to kind of, just kind of write about it randomly. It takes time. It is painstaking also because it's a lonely process. I mean, you just are into this. But you are a researcher, so I think so you must have enjoyed it. It would be a great book
And the
for
whole
you.
point of writing this book was I didn't want that research to be wasted. That I knew so much. I read so much about the common, like what was happening around. At least
Yeah,
some details that I got, and that's why I
yeah,
weaved this story, right? And that's why
yeah,
staying true the Mahabharata was a bit easier because that was exciting. Because I really wanted to know what was happening. What were they wearing? What was it? What were they eating at that time in
yeah,
Central India?
yeah.
Not
And you
potatoes,
have
definitely,
mentioned
because they came from
that is
Ireland.
yeah, yeah, that is so interesting. What was the milieu like? What was happening back then? And tell me something. I mean, were you surprised during your research? Were you surprised by something like which was like really okay? I never thought that this could have happened during the ages. Were you surprised by something?
Like the way they expected, like because it's focusing on the war as an example,
Yeah,
on the second day it's written in Mahabharata that Bhima killed 1,000 elephants, and
yeah,
he and Kalinga army was defeated on the second day. That's how
mm,
the scope of the story is. So I was
yeah,
like, how can I write that a person killed 1,000 elephants without making looking like my readers feel that, oh, this is again another fantasy, or
yeah,
it's just like like similar to
yeah,
Mahabharata.
yeah,
So I try to research further and say the formations that they made, the way they attacked each other, the rules that were written in the how they should fight with each other
yeah, mm,
were so clear that it was easier for people to fight. And Bhima wasn't alone. Yes, when we say India won against a country, or let's say US won against a country, it's not
yeah,
just a country against a country, it's the soldiers
yeah,
who fought all along and etc. So
yeah,
Bhima had an army of people who were fighting with another army. And of course, Bhima
right,
was powerful, so he fought with others too. So I try to kind of connect that kind of reality that I came across Mahabharata to the fictionalized side of my story too.
right. So interesting. Let's take another question. This should be interesting, especially for our generation. Mahi is asking about, have you watched the TV adaptations of Mahabharata? Then did you realize any discrepancies between that version and the one you have researched about? It's basically talking about, the fictionalized TV adaptation. Watched it? Have you enjoyed it? And what are the discrepancies that you came across?
Well, it was some decades back I watched it, if you don't want to know my age, as you mentioned. But it was some decades back I watched the TV part of that,
Yeah,
which definitely was interesting at that my age when I was younger. And, yeah, that's what I think that's what they tried to do with Mahabharata. Even the written part is also to make it much more compelling, to make it
yeah,
much more, what is it, interesting. They added uh, it's a written part, right? Epic, it's a written
right.
epic. So definitely
Yeah,
when you want others to know about history, you
yeah,
add a bit more to that, and make it much more compelling. That's what I thought. Yes, TV, of course, I talked about how the celestial weapons were shown with wind
oh
blowing,
yes,
and the snakes coming from
bad
arrows.
CGI, bad
Yeah.
CGI.
So that definitely affected me to think about, like, this is definitely fantasy. This is
Yeah,
definitely not how Mahabharata happened at the time. And
yeah,
maybe that's what kept me away from Mahabharata for some years,
yeah,
in a way. But
yeah,
hopefully, new series that are coming up, which I couldn't watch, are much better in that way, to actually write it in a much more genuine way. Yes, an
right.
arrow may have a power, but maybe they're not an arrow. They were actually missiles or something. There are so many theories around that, right?
Yeah,
But the way it's portrayed, yes, it made. There was some discrepancies, I would assume, between the liberties that people take on in portraying or showcasing how it was fought versus how it was actually.
right. It's it's amazing, but once you have watched that version, it is so tough to write a book like that because it is you have to kind of unlearn everything that you have,
Absolutely, you
watched.
need to, because there is a section in the book where I talk about Mitrajit getting tired in the war. If they were fighting
Yeah,
a whole day war for 18 days, weren't they
yeah,
getting tired? And a common
totally.
soldier, like, you
Yeah,
can't, and it was with a sword,
yeah,
so they would get tired. So what were the rules? And actually went through the rules in Mahabharata,
yeah,
as Bhishma Pitamaha. He
yeah,
he comes up with the rules for everybody. He says
yeah,
that, when you're tired, Put your
Mm.
sword down, kneel. That means everybody will know that you're tired, and nobody should be attacked when somebody is taking rest. So there were
Wow.
so clear rules on that because it's fought with dharma, right? At the time,
Right.
dharma was there. That's what they said. Dharma
Yeah.
was there in Dwapar Yug, Kali Yug.
Yeah.
Dharma has only three legs, two legs, all those things, right? So I was like intrigued by the details, and I tried
Mm.
to view it into my story here. That he got tired, he sat down, but he saw that another soldier, the opposite opponent soldier, wasn't following rules. He was attacking.
Yeah.
So it's like because that's what happened in the war too. There was that clash between dharma and adharma, and that's what I try to portray within this the fictional side of the things too.
I think so. We lost you for the final sentence. Can
Oh,
you
sorry.
repeat? Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. I was saying that that's what I try to portray the fight between the dharma and the adharma, that there were rules
Oh,
at the
yes.
time, but still there were other soldiers who weren't following the rules.
Right. Yeah.
So again, that's what a soldier feels, right, when they're in a war. And that's what I wanted to,
Mm.
as you said, unlearn the what I have learned from Mahabharata
Yeah.
or what I've watched,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
make it much more as generic, as genuine, as uh, what is it? The smell of the village, like
Right.
as
Right.
easy as possible.
Yeah. There's a part where you talk about Krishna, and of course, the the kind of it was very strange for me, because of course everybody knows about this, that this happened, but just sprinkling these kind of stories in between, it was very interesting for me. The Eklavya story, and the way you have talked about Krishna, that he was of course the the charioteer for Arjun, but the Narayani Sena was on the other side, which was very like okay, how can that work out, and just talking about that sets kind of the mood for the book ahead. Why did you choose to kind of sprinkle these stories in between, and what was the I suppose it would be for the narrative, but tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like it's, and that's what, like when I was reading Mahabharata myself too, right? I had these
Mhm.
same questions too. What Krishna
Okay.
is fighting for Pandavas on the side of Pandavas, not fighting actually. He's participating as a charioteer, but he gave
Yeah.
away his Sena to his army to fight
Right.
against the Pandavas, including
Yeah.
himself on the other side. So I had the same doubt. So I wanted to make sure that that is these kind of stories which we had doubts about, like Ekalavya
Yeah.
stories, that he had to
Yeah.
cut away his thumb, and
Yeah.
what the reasons behind that.
Yeah.
Because these are also Ustra Karnikas were also a tribe, and Ekalavya
Yeah.
also comes from a Nishada tribe side of the things, right? So it's like I
Yeah.
wanted to say how they were thinking when they heard about Ekalavya, because there's history.
Yeah.
They must have got the news that hey, this prince in Nishada kingdom called Ekalavya had to give away his thumb because
Yeah.
of that. So how these guys felt at the time as a kind of another tribe,
Yeah.
and even while fighting with the Narayani Sena, because Narayani Sena and Kalinga Sena fought together in Mahabharata
Yeah.
on the Kaurava side. So these
Yeah.
guys had to fight alongside with them.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, do we need to trust these guys or not?
Right.
Or and
Right.
they were also intrigued. How are they going to attack Krishna if he
Yeah.
comes across on a charioteer, like you're attacking your own king? So it's
Right.
like genuine questions, right? Like,
Yeah.
like as a kid, like
Yeah.
I went even as a kid, like, oh, this can't happen. How can they attack their own king? Well, let's
Right.
get into the story and give a reasoning behind it.
Yeah. Also, you talked about Mitrajit earlier, and very interesting character, because he's although he's a soldier, but he's like kind of side hustling as a soldier, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he is a farmer. I mean, he does a lot of things, but he's primarily a farmer, and he has been forced into this. And he's a family guy. He just wants to stay at home, be with his daughter, and be with his wife, just wants to be in the village. But again, then he has to travel with the soldiers to participate in the war, the big war. Everybody's so excited that this is going to be a war of epic proportions. I mean, until shit hits the fan, let's call it that. But also he is always worried about communicating back home, right? And
Mhm.
in a point at a point in the book, he's like, we should create a communication channel, with the village, talk about the leader, of course, Aparajit.
Yeah,
I
apologies. Yes.
he talks about talks to, kind of indirectly talks to him about setting up a communication channel, which was very thoughtful. A complete family guy. Also back in the village, there is of course all the men have gone away, but these women are so kind of, they want to get the mood very light-hearted and positive, because if one just talks about the war, it gets slightly, I mean, depressing will be an understatement.
Yeah.
They are doing a lot in the village, and don't we see that even now? I mean, army wives, do that. I mean, they lead a very, shadowed sort of life. They are not glorified at all. They are just left to kind of, navigate.
Hmm.
So, what are your thoughts on this? This kind of man existing in a very sort of, a progressive guy, I must say, that you have, created here. Talk about that, please.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Yeah,
Like even now in our culture right now, we look at progressive guys like them, right? Like we have people who work hard, who are family, who wants to stay on their own, but
yeah,
brought into these kind of situations, and they become rebellious, and they actually stand up for the whole society, right?
yeah,
And so for me, my thinking was that what were some of them, if those kind of characters were there during that time,
yeah,
and who wants to be with the family but now pulled into that. He still wants to keep communication, because again these are thoughtful. I wanted to sprinkle the areas where we can show Mitrajit also as a leader without being the leader. So
yeah.
like nobody thought about communicating back home
Mm,
about information. So that's a
mm,
leadership, because hey, we are
mm,
safe, we are fine here. That's a
mm.
leadership. So that
Right.
so I try to portray the characterization, like each character in their own way. And similarly
Yeah,
for women, as you mentioned,
yeah,
army wives, or these families, these tribes, women who stayed back. The
yeah,
reason I wanted to portray that way is because people were progressive during that time. Like
yeah,
if you look at Satyabhama, for example.
yeah, yeah.
Satyabhama, Krishna's wife, killed
Yes, yes.
Nakasura. So she was a warrior. They were
Yeah,
trained to be warriors at the time too. So similarly, I wanted to bring that context into this,
yeah,
with this tribe, to say that yes, they
yeah,
were farming community, but they were also warriors, and they even trained their women to be
yeah,
warriors.
yeah,
So it's and that's what happens when men go. They were ready to protect others, the elderly people, if attacked, and
yeah,
they also wanted to keep the mood light, because what would
yeah,
happen? Like they can't keep on talking about the war and set the mood bad, right? So again, the leadership of women,
yeah,
right? Empowerment and the leadership.
yeah.
And women, when they take up leadership roles, they're like, excellent too. So I wanted
I
to
know,
appreciate that.
I know. I can vouch for it. Of course, my wife is sitting right here, so I have to say yes. But oh yes, just kidding. But it is. This was very refreshing for me, because one thing that the Mahabharata and of course the epics have been kind of notorious for. Let's call it that. Maybe in the depiction,
Mhm.
that they are very sort of men oriented, and this is not woke, in
Yeah,
today's terms, and all of that. And but I don't think so that was the case. I mean, it was, I think so, they were great, characters from the epics. And
absolutely.
I think it has been documented in some books, like the
Swayamvar.
one where,
Swayamvaram is a great example, like Swayamvar,
yeah.
for example.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
Swayamvar, which happened, the women had a choice on who they should pick.
Wow,
So
wow.
that's such an, it's straight away from Ramayana too. Like
Yeah,
Sita
we have
was
gone backwards, then we have gone backwards in some
exactly,
ways.
and that's what I wanted to portray in my book too. Yes, it's a historical fiction, but I want to
Yeah,
make sure that the culture is brought up, and I wanted people to understand that yeah, things were different at that time.
yeah. And it's amazing that you have brought all these themes out. On the surface of it, sometimes we might miss it, because in the excitement of the men are going to war, and that is the narrative. But in between, if somebody, I would say that a mature reader will kind of pick up on these themes. And I recommend, of course, you guys, you buy the book and then experience it, and then let Manu know, like, what did you feel. I think we have a question, and then we'll go
Sure.
further. I think Hardik is asking. Do you personally believe that the Mahabharata war could have been avoided? Could it have been different a story than what it already is? I mean, every war should have been avoided, but yeah, your take on this.
Well, I mean, it's a very epic. So I will be I'm a very small person in this world to comment on that. But yes, it could have been avoided probably. Again, it's all negotiations and etc. Right? If you
Yeah,
read the book, there is a sentence where again I wanted to be from both the sides, right? Like
yeah,
yes, Kauravas were notorious. They didn't give away anything. They were always keeping Pandavas on the other side. But at the same time, I had to question Kauravas too. Like couldn't they give just five villages that the Pandavas
yeah.
asked?
That's it.
Like,
That's it.
and it's done. Why so much anger? Well,
Yeah,
the Duryodhan was put into focus all the time too. That's why the anger, right? Again,
yeah.
it's egos. It's the clash. Who is
Yes,
powerful? Who is better? Oh,
yes,
and that goes on even now. That's the interesting thing, and that led to this war. If they would have just given five villages, or if Pandavas wouldn't have said that I'm going to kill you, or we are
yeah,
going to take your thigh away, no, I'm going to smash you,
yes,
or I'm going to take your blood and put in the
yes,
hair of Draupadi's, all those big things, all those
yes,
like, and even if they didn't have insulted Draupadi, right?
yeah,
Like so many things have come like,
yes,
and that's the best thing about Mahabharata. If you if and that's my intention too. By reading Janya Bharata, I wanted new generation and people
yeah,
outside India also to read about Mahabharata, because there are so
yeah,
many nuances within Mahabharata
yeah,
which tells that this could have been avoided at every step. Like
yeah,
Dhritarashtra is blind, so let's make Pandu king. Why?
yeah.
Right?
Totally, totally.
Disab-
Yeah.
but afterwards, actually, Dhritarashtra was the king afterwards. So
Yes, yes.
the whole war could have been avoided even at that context,
Totally,
or
totally.
even at the Bhishma's level too, right? So,
Yeah,
so there are so many nuances it could have been avoided,
yeah.
but it happened, and
It's a
unfortunately,
turn of events, and I mean, yeah. We have another question.
no, sure.
Uh, Bala is asking, how have you looked at the character of Bhishma? I mean, I think so. He's a Bhishma fan, I suppose, but
Absolutely. Again, this was more focused on the non-royalties here, right?
okay,
The whole focus of the story. So I didn't focus much on the Bhishma side,
okay,
but when I looked at it, it was more like uh, he's a powerful warrior
yeah,
who knew that any war could end up into disasters, and I
yeah,
think that's why he came up with those rules. Like
yeah,
what were the rules for the war? So he came the day before and he said, these are the rules that everybody has to fight. Unfortunately, not everybody followed it, but
I know.
that tells about the character, that somebody as wise as them, as
Mhm.
Bhishma, knew that this could be a disaster, and that's why
Mhm.
they try to negotiations, and that's why in the book we also talk about that. What were the wise men doing? Couldn't they
Yeah.
negotiate further? Like,
Yes, yes. Where we go back to the first question, and that is a big question. What were the wise men doing? And that's the wider question even now. What are the wise men doing? I mean, you have everything at your disposal. You have the best intelligence, AI, and whatever, but it boils down to egos at the end of the day. Technology is out of the window after everything. So yeah, great talking to you, Manu, and I thank you for answering all those questions. For writing this book, and it's a very bold thing that you have done, because not everybody kind of takes this risk. Of course, when you are touching the epics, everybody's so touchy, right? Everybody's like, don't write about the epics, because, oh, I forgot to ask you the reaction of your beta readers, and the people, your family. What were they like? I mean, why are you writing about this epic? People can get like crazy when it comes to our sort of we put everybody, our heroes on a pedestal.
absolutely,
Yeah,
and that's what I also. It was a very interesting reaction too, because nobody. I can boldly say, or maybe or not, but this was a never ever written before, like never written before
ah,
kind of a narrative, right? So everybody
right.
took it by a shock, like, because
Yeah.
yeah, I never thought about that. Like everybody would write to me and they were like, I
Nobody
never.
thought about it. I was reading the book, and I was like, what, why did I think about this? Because I suppose that it goes down. It is that reason itself that we looked at it like it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Who cares what was happening? elsewhere.
Absolutely. So when we look at it from a historical point of view, right? It's our culture. So I was like, okay, what happened to the others? So my family members or the beta readers were definitely shocked at this
Yeah.
the uniqueness of the theme, and of course the way it was portrayed, the characters were portrayed, the research done to even to say what fish they were having at that time,
Oh
right?
yes,
Like, that was a huge research to find out. and
yes,
and then of course the risk is there always, but it's not about the risk, it's about more about creating more awareness about the book. My
right.
intention, as I said, is that I wanted new generation to read more about this book and
Yeah,
about Mahabharata too. And this
yeah,
particular book cover, I want to actually give a huge shout out.
yeah,
This drawing, this cover
yeah.
art was done by a 15-year-old girl.
Wow, wonderful,
And I
wonderful.
wanted to keep that because I wanted to respect the imagination of a 15-year-old girl who understood that there are two
Right.
sides of this story, and
Yeah.
there's a partition, the colors, and etc. So uh,
Just a moment. Can you show it again? I'll just
oh yeah,
kind of
sure.
get there. Yeah.
Like such
Oh,
a
perfect. Yes.
nice
It's
drawing
quite
about
intricate. Quite
it.
quite intricate. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it has got that rawness that is needed, because it is just a 15-year-old, how they would imagine what was happening. And it's always better, rather than perfection, go for something which is like so imaginative and raw. That is always better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Like I wanted this generation, the newer generation, to understand Mahabharata. And here is a girl who understood the theme of this book and drew that. So I wanted to
Yeah,
encourage that, right? I could have always gone for a nice
I
design and the look,
yes,
but that's what I wanted this book to be, as down to the earth and as genuine as possible, both the story wise, the presented, how
yeah,
it's presented, the name
yeah,
wise, and it's the first book, so it's that's why the
right,
war, the focus is on the war. So,
yes. Oh, yes, I have to ask you about, I mean, can you disclose the following themes, or it's just in the works right
oh,
now?
no, no. It's actually written. I actually wrote in this book. It's actually I'm drafting right now.
Yeah,
Still, it's creating these, connecting the true facts of Mahabharata with fiction is a huge task. Making
I
sure that I still stay true to the epic, right? So
yeah,
this is called the war, and that's why it's all in red, and it's all
yes,
like the war, and the focus is on Kurukshetra war. The
yeah,
second one is called the Deluge.
okay, okay,
Deluge means flood.
yes,
So
yes,
without giving away much information on what it looks like, what
yeah,
it is
yeah,
about, but it's a
right,
follow-up, it's a sequel to this
right,
one. When I
yeah,
imagined the story first, the idea was to create one book, but I wanted it to
yeah,
be easy to learn, easy to read. That's why I
yeah,
wanted to stop at the right time where the first book stops and
yeah,
then continue on to the second book, which
yeah,
is The Deluge.
yeah. Thank you so much, Manu, for talking to us and being on the Book Nerds podcast. Any book that has kind of helped you? Of course, the texts are there. You have read a lot of text around it. Any particular book that helped you kind of, get into the zone of writing this one?
Definitely. I mean, I was, as I mentioned in the beginning, not just the books, but more the informational, the videos, and etc.
Okay.
Right. So, Amish Tripaঠি's book, of course, was like it's kind of the trendsetter, you can say, from a fictional side of the things.
Yes.
A few
Yes.
years back, right? So that
Yeah.
definitely gave me a context, like, okay, something like an epic could be written in a different way.
Yeah.
And then of course all the other books that I read about the other versions of Mahabharata, but they stayed true to the royalty, like Count of either
Yeah.
talking about Karna or Kunti or Draupadi or Arjuna, like they were still focusing on that.
It's
But they
an
all
easier choice, right?
yes,
It's an easier marketing choice. Let's
absolutely.
call it.
But they definitely inspired me, and of course, as I mentioned, Nilesh Shokji's videos on historical side of the things, right?
Mhm.
On that kind of brought me to the point where I can actually connect the historical part to the
Yeah.
fictional part, and then weave it together. So that's how the whole journey came up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to us. And we are looking forward to the deluge, of course, in not the real deluge, but the series. So we are going to look forward to that. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us and sharing this entire experience through the book, with us, because to go back and, kind of research, it takes a lot, but it's a condensed form, and, it's beautiful that what you have done, combining fiction and should I say non-fiction? Yeah, I mean, in my head, it is non-fiction, so I can call it that. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thanks, Rohan, and thanks to Booknerds. And I wish all my the watch whoever is watching right now and the future readers all the best. And thanks for all the support. And I look forward to all the reviews on Amazon and
Oh,
wherever you
totally.
provide the review.
Yeah, and guys, whoever is watching, just go there and whatever you like about the book, not like about the book, whether it could have been more gory or not so gory, or that was not the point. But whatever you like or don't like about the book, just express it on Amazon. And yeah, first grab a copy. Let us know like what you felt about it. Could have been better. Could have been, has Manu done a great job? What kind of job he has done? I suppose he would be open to all of that. So just write a review on Amazon and reach out to him on social media as well. And if you have any other questions which we can route to you, do send them to us on our socials, and we would be happy to do that. And Manu, thank you so much. I think we went a little bit over time, but it is all worth it because it's about the Mahabharata, and why not? So thank you so
Thank you
much,
very
and
much.
looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thanks, Rohan. Thanks.